Hi class, welcome to EdVantage. I'm Dr. Jody Richardson Delgado. Today we're going to be talking about mood disorders. Now, mood disorders are a category that include depressive disorders as well as bipolar disorders. Again, we've talked about in previous videos about how the DSM-5 has put things in different categories than the DSM-4. So in the DSM-4, they had a large category called mood disorders, and this included both depressive and bipolar disorders. In the DSM-5, they've actually separated these out into depressive disorders and bipolar disorders by themselves. In here, we're going to talk about each one of these disorders. So with major depressive disorder, this is one of the many depressive disorders that are in the DSM-5. This is the one that we most commonly think of when we hear someone might be experiencing major depression. So this occurs when at least 5 signs of depression last at least 2 weeks or more. It must include things like loss of interest and or pleasure in nearly all activities, intense sadness, and some of the other symptoms that we might see that go along with those first 2 might include sleep disturbances, increase of need for sleep or decrease of need for sleep, change in appetite, eating more or eating less. That often goes along with change in weight, increase of weight, decrease of weight, psychomotor changes. With this, we're talking about someone who might become more agitated, and you see I'm kind of fidgeting. So someone who just appears to be more agitated in the moment, or they slow way down. You hear my voice, it's slowing down. You'll see the movements slowing down. They look like they're really on slow motion, and they're talking and walking and gesturing much slower than they typically would. That is something that we would look for, and it's called a psychomotor agitation, would be agitated. Retardation, or the slowing down of the motor movements, that's what that's called. It affects concentration. So we might see someone who's really having a very difficult time concentrating. These are some of the symptoms that go along with major depressive disorder. Now, with bipolar disorder, we're looking at a disorder that is characterized by depression, what we just looked at, as well as mania. So we would see an individual go through a depressive state and then sometimes go into a normal state or flip into mania, or the opposite. They're in a manic state and go down into a depressive state. So a manic state is characterized by a change in mood, elevated, expansive, increased goal-directed activity, lots of energy, and this typically lasts a few days to a week. It's not typically going to last a long period of time. With depression, we're looking at 2 weeks or longer. So with mania, it's going to be a much shorter period of time. We also might see 3 of the following is typically what we'll look at: inflated self-esteem, decreased need for sleep, pressured speech, racing thoughts, distractibility, risky behavior, increased goal-directed activity. So with pressured speech, I don't know if you've ever been around someone who kind of is a close talker. They talk very close to you and their speech is very rapid, and you kind of just want to move away from them, and they seem to be talking right at you, right on top of you. That's pressured speech. Now that in and of itself, some people just do that. But if this is a change for that individual and suddenly there's this pressured speech and they're getting closer to you and they're talking faster than they usually do, that's what we would call pressured speech. Racing thoughts and distractibility, these can go together. Racing thoughts of thinking about all the different things that we can do and excited about those things, and then being distracted by them. And if I'm talking about those, this might lead to the pressured speech. So I'm so excited today. You know, there's just so many things that I want to do. We can go outside and we can go camping. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe it. The other day when I went outside, you wouldn't believe all the things that I saw. And they're switching and they're talking very fast. Again, we're looking for a change in their normal behavior. Risky behavior. This is an individual who's taking risks that they normally wouldn't take. So these can be any areas of increased sexual riskiness. This can be gambling. Suddenly they're spending a lot of money that they wouldn't typically spend. They're not someone who really spends a lot of money on gambling. So we're talking about risks in a lot of different areas. Increased goal-directed activity. Now, this is where we see someone like Picasso, who painted a lot of paintings. He was said to have bipolar disorder. And so this increased goal-directed activities sometimes is really helpful for individuals when they get into these manic states. And so it's kind of a balance of, is this kind of a good thing for this individual? But if we see that with the risky behavior, the pressured speech, some of the other issues that go along with mania, this can really cause a lot of problems for an individual. So again, typically we'll see someone go into a manic episode and then fall into depressive state because someone cannot sustain that kind of energy for a long period of time and kind of crash. But that's not always the case. So sometimes we'll go to mania and then kind of go to regular mood and then go into depression. Now, the cause of these disorders are, again, lots of different things. We look at biology, we look at psychological, and we also look at the social environment around us. Biology, we know that there's a difference in brain functioning. There's issues with neurotransmitters, genetics, and evolution. So with brain functioning, we do see on many individuals who go through an MRI, when we look at their brain, the whole brain is not as active as an individual who does not have major depressive disorder. So there's literally a depressed activity in the brain that we see on many individuals who have major depressive disorder. We also see neurotransmitter imbalances. Often this deals with serotonin, as we've talked about in some of the previous videos. There's also a strong genetic component with bipolar disorder. So with bipolar disorder, we see there's more of a genetic link than there is with some of the other depressive disorders. Psychosocial, we know that there's the stress in our environment can really exacerbate some of the symptoms of depression and bipolar disorders. We also see disturbed interpersonal relationships with both bipolar disorders as well as depressive disorders. Faulty thinking, as I'll go into in the next slide, poor self-concept, and faulty attributions, and we'll talk about that on the next slide as well. Faulty attributions and faulty thinking is something that we've learned about through cognitive behavior therapy, and we'll talk about that in the therapy chapter. But I wanted to start to introduce this idea of faulty attributions because we do think that this is a big contributor, especially to that depressive state. So individuals who have a depressive explanatory style explain events very differently than individuals who have an optimistic explanatory style. So if a bad event happens and someone has a depressive explanatory style, they are going to explain it as internal, stable, and global. Someone who has an optimistic explanatory style is going to explain that in terms of external, unstable, and specific. And it's flipped for good events. So for good events, a depressive explanatory style would be external, unstable, and specific. An optimistic explanatory style would be internal, stable, and global. So I'm going to give you an example. So let's say you go to a parking lot and you park your car and you come back after the event and you can't find your car. Someone who has a depressive explanatory style, so we're talking about a bad event, right? So someone who has a depressive explanatory style is going to see that as internal, stable, and global. So they might say something like, I can never find my car. This always happens to me. Internal, it's me, right? Always happens, stable, and global. It's happening everywhere. This isn't just one specific incident. Now, someone who has an optimistic explanatory style would see this as external, unstable, and specific. You walk out to the parking lot. Oh my gosh, look at all these cars. Everybody seems to have the same car. It's really hard for me to find my car when everybody's driving the same car. How weird, right? This isn't something that you typically see. So it's unstable. It's external. Everybody's driving the same type of car who comes to this event, right? And it's specific to this. That's what we're talking about with the depressive explanatory style and the optimistic explanatory style. And this is something that we really get into when we look at the way that we explain the world around us. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the therapy section of these videos. So I hope this video has helped. Thanks for watching. Please click on the EdVantage logo to subscribe.